This conference will now be recorded.
The topic of accountability and the power of accountability, this always scares people when you talk about accountability. And I think that holding ourselves accountable and holding others accountable is really critical for our success. And the better we get at that, and the more consistent we are, the more successful we will be. And our organizations will be much healthier and much stronger. So I'm gonna figure out how to move forward here. There we go. So again, I'm Greta Brooks, CEO and founder of Sales Boost. And what we do is we improve the value of human capital with soft skill training. We have a patent, yay, 776 days to get our patent. But we have the only automated simulation using voice analysis training with instant coaching and feedback. And so what that means is you learn scenarios through a simulation. So the reason why we developed this is because adult learners must be able to put their knowledge, and as you all know, into practice with real life applications. And the #1 skill gap with employees is communication and self-confidence. Although we think, or we heard, that the key to success is attractiveness. Do you guys remember that show? It was like on 60 Minutes, and there was something about most attractive people have the most success and advancement at work. It's actually not true. It's actually confidence. So what we focus on is building confidence and communication skills through soft skills. So if you're interested, look us up. We'd love to work with you. We have lots of hospitality training. So you're gonna see some of our training within this session. So a lot of our topics, we have leadership topics and different curriculum. I know you guys all know a lot about adult learning. So that is what our system is completely based on, and the neuroscience of how you learn a new skill. All right, so accountability, I love this saying, and I don't know who said it. It is anonymous. So consistency creates accountability. And what does consistency mean to you guys? I'll let anybody raise their hand. And feel free to send in a chat, because then I can read your comments too. So consistency should be developed to be the way we develop our habits. So if you develop a consistent approach, you develop consistency within your best practices. Consistency is really key to accountability. And I want you to really grab hold of that, because that is where habits are formed. I'm going to go back to what Sales Boost is developed from, and that is the neuroscience of developing, practicing, and rehearsing, and that consistency of learning. So it is a theme, and it's really important. I'm going to look up your notes. So Melanie says, doing things the same way all the time. That is correct. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to be covering culture, staffing, expectations, coaching, and how we communicate. And so these are all topics that we'll get into. If there's any that you'd really like to get into more and deeper, let me know. Just raise your hand and ask questions, and we will have group discussions about them. So the first topic we're going to talk about is culture. But first, let's go back. I really want to understand how you guys are feeling right now, especially. How are you feeling? And then how is your team feeling? And do you know? And then my question for you is, how do you know how they're feeling? So if anyone wants to speak up, feel free. Otherwise, I'll look at your chats. Anybody want to talk about how they feel? Kristen?
Oh, Jim's saying a little on edge.
On edge?
Which probably many of you feel that way.
Yeah, I was going to add concerned for the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Audrey, and
frustrated and uncertain.
Yeah, and so Brandy Edwards shared, I feel pretty good. The field team at Pacifica Hotels are feeling tired And I know this because of direct feedback from the field teams.
Yeah, I'm hearing that loud and clear. So this message, I hope, is helpful for all of you, because what we want to be is, really concise and making sure we're communicating and holding people accountable. So this topic is really interesting because we think accountability takes a lot of time, but it's really, really a process and approach. So it's really critical. And so what I'm really wanting to hear from you is really what your interests are, so I can make sure that we're flexible with this session and I dive deeper into certain areas. And Brandy, I hear so much from different Facebook forums and different places about how people are feeling, and they're just wearing multiple hats and doing so many different things. And priorities change every day, right? So things just change constantly, and it is frustrating for people that things change all the time. But that is a key point that we have to keep in mind, that shifts and priorities and communication, those are all really important to make sure that we are dedicated to a process so that our team can feel less overwhelmed. Let's see who else. Overwhelmed, there. Ariana says that. Fresque, I don't know if I said your name correctly, I apologize. Jim Rich, thank you. Some of our team is scared and working to sell positivity despite a little fear. Ooh, JA says determined, and then a little bit on edge for sure. These are the reason why I'm saying this, and I'm asking these questions, is it's really important to make sure that you know how your team is feeling and that you give them a moment to reflect, because being able to communicate your feelings and emotions in a safe place is really important. And it's hard to hear as a leader. It's really hard to hear when they say they're overwhelmed. So Brandy, I don't know if you feel that way, but I do. When my team says they're overwhelmed, it hits me in my heart, and it's really painful to hear that, but it is where we are. So part of our reality. Thank you for your feedback there. All right, so culture. So we're going to talk about, just real briefly, some really great assessment tools, some approaches that we use related to culture. And this is an area that if I could do this all over again, I would create my culture all over again from scratch, from when I was younger. And at Sales Boost, we update our culture once a year. How many of you update your culture on a consistent basis and monitor it and update it and then actually act on that? So it's one thing to talk about it, it's another thing to do it. So how many of you are talking about your culture and implementing changes and hitting a reset button?
I've worked with a couple of restaurant companies over the past couple of years that have, it's not necessarily an annual exercise, but it is constant, especially as companies are growing. You see that it's that culture piece, although probably just as important to do if you're not growing, right? But I think that, like you talked about it doing annually, where something you don't lose sight of.
Yeah, annually is really important. What went right? What isn't going well? What do we need to change? And listening to ideas and concepts from your team. Now, with giant organizations, it's a bigger ship and it's a little tougher to change that. But if you have the ability to change the culture within your team, then that's where I would recommend you focus your concept of culture and make sure that your team knows that they're part of creating the culture, because there's accountability around that. And it also helps because they understand whether or not the people that you hire are a good culture fit. So when you're defining it much more precisely, you will actually find people that fit your culture. And then you have an aha moment with your team. And some people will realize that they're probably not on the right team. And some people will feel really excited that they're part of this team. So that's important to realize, that not everyone's going to be a good culture fit. But the more honest you are about your culture, and the more that you can define it and speak to it, the better fit you'll find with team members, because there's nothing more painful than having the wrong team members on the deck. That can be a very, very painful process. We want to make sure that they're also a development fit. We want to make sure that people really are excited and motivated to learn, that they're constant learners. And so whatever it is from a development standpoint that people need to do, you need to be realistic about that as well. So that should be something that you're discussing on a very regular basis, because development is one of those areas, because remember the stat earlier, skill development, skills, communication, those things are absolutely critical in making sure that we develop people and they have new skills. We're going to have to upskill and reskill 54% of the workforce globally, more than half. And now with COVID, let's just accentuate that even more. So it's probably way beyond that. And if we have to upskill and reskill 54% of our workforce, there's a lot for us to do. So development fit is critical, because if they're not going to learn and do the work to develop themselves and be part of the process, that's really key to your success. So I put a big, big placeholder on that one, because we're all in learning and development, and this one is really key. And sometimes our own team members or we ourselves do not want to put in the time. I am reading, does anybody know our book club or any books that we're actually working on right now in our book club? So I keep book clubs going once a month, although I probably keep that book open for many months. So I start a new one each month, and then sometimes I have 4 or 5 going at the same time, just because my mood changes. But right now I'm reading a book called The Principles by Ray Dalio. Has anyone read that one?
Yes, it's fantastic.
Yeah, it's wonderful. And so he has a lot of great concepts related to culture and finding the fit and determining what works and what doesn't. So highly recommend that one. And then we're going to talk about interviewing skills real briefly. And I know that everyone interviews people and knows how to do that, but knowing how to do it properly is really key to that culture shift. So if I skip over a video or something that we're going to show, I'll send this out to you guys in a link, and then you all can download it and use this internally as well for your own organizations.
Greta Braxton made a comment that I would love to read to you. We're currently talking about culture as our company has completely changed due to the pandemic. How do we shift our culture to align with the current state of our organization?
So it takes all these concepts. This accountability could be your culture. So once we end up with, we end this session, I think you'll get some juicy nuggets. But culture comes from accountability. So we could have called the session creating a culture of accountability, or creating culture with accountability. It is really powerful. So accountability is the #1 thing that will keep things moving. Again, having great ideas and brainstorming is fantastic, but what are you doing to implement those? And so if everyone is part of the reset, in answer to your question, and we'll have Q&A at the very end, and I'll stop intermittently, but you know, it is critical to focus on culture. And the more you know what that means, and everyone knows what that means, and you put these concepts into place, and I'll speak to them across as we go through the process here and why they're important to culture. But I can't impress enough that you can't change culture without accountability changing as well. All right, so we're going to watch this. I don't know if you've watched it, but I always find it interesting. So millennials. Can everyone hear, by the way?
No.
All right, so you guys cannot hear that, correct?
Correct.
I'm not sure what to do there. All right, we'll pass by this. Anyway, millennials, it's okay, I have talking points just in case. Not every application works with me on video, but you can watch all the fun videos on your own that I have in here. So by 2020, millennials will comprise at least 50% of the workforce. And by 2025, which isn't that far off, 75% of the workforce will be millennials or younger. So it's really important to understand, as I talk culture, what does this mean to you? So if you know that millennials and Gen Z are going to make up the majority of our workforce, what does that mean? I'll let you guys chat those in or speak up. Okay, I don't see any notes here. All right, so I'm going to keep going. So what we use to really determine fits is, have you guys all heard of strength finders? So assessments are really, really important. And millennials and Gen Z, one of the components there, we're going to have 5 generations in the workforce, and we do actually right now. We're soon to have possibly 6 if we have the folks from early 1900 all the way to today. So just depends on how long they want to work, but we will have 5 generations, and they see things very differently. So looking at people's strengths, not necessarily whether they're millennials or Gen Z or what age they are, we tend to break people apart and we don't really find connections. So a good way to find connections is actually to do a strength finders assessment. And what that does is it shows how many people as a team are achievers or responsible. And then we start creating a language. And so talking about culture, change your language so that people feel accepted and and they're understood. So it doesn't really focus on Gen Z or millennials per se, but we do have to address some initiatives. But really, we want to give everyone, because we have 5 generations, a common language. So this is our team actually last year. And so as a team, you can look here that we're very achiever focused. We have a lot of stamina. We need freedom to work at our own pace. And so when I look at all of these things, these are all the things that are important to our team. So it's not irrelevant that they're millennials or Gen Zs, but now you can actually see that they're actually grouped within, or that we have similarities instead of differences. So I think Strength Finders is probably one of the strongest opportunities to get people to build and bond together, see yourself as a team, and again, where your strengths are. So it's Gallup. If you don't know about this, it's Gallup Strength Finders. And we found this very interesting. But look at this relator. 27% of us are relators. And then 25% are analytical and learners. So you can see that we're highly responsible and we like to get things done. So we can actually explain ourselves when someone comes in and says, you're joining a team and this is what we look like. And that's really powerful, because people who understand what it's going to feel like to work for our team, we're able to demonstrate it this way. Okay, so Janet said, it means you better get to know them. Yes, you better get to know them now. That's true for the millennials. And I think when we went back on that question, I'm getting, Braxton said it will be more of a laid back environment and technology driven. Kind of yes or no, it really just depends. But those things I really don't think matter as much, because how we train people, what they're expecting is one thing, but how they work as a team and how you collectively approach issues and topics and how people will feel is really addressed in when you understand their strengths. So I really can't impress upon you enough. This is probably one that I highly, highly suggest and recommend, because it makes figuring out your culture very easy, and I'm able to demonstrate that at the drop of a hat. And it's not very expensive. You could just do the top 5 and it's about $30. Sometimes they have them on sale. So it's like $20 to $30 per person. And this really helps us understand, so this is staffing by strengths. So where we are lacking, did anyone notice where we were lacking on our team, where we don't have our top 5 strengths?
Analytical was 1.
Yep, so we're analytical, so we're blue. Yep, so we have relationship building, influencing, and strategic. I think the colors are wrong there, sorry. But we were missing executing. So I'm sorry, we were missing, I think we're missing one here, sorry, I have to move you guys. Strategic thinking. So we have a little bit of everything, but where you have a gap is how you can actually look at finding people that fill that need. So let's say you're all achievers And you're all executing and influencing. Your activators, command, maximizer, self-assured, and then you have a few people that are relationship builders and not a lot of people that are strategic. So what should you look for? You want to look for strategic and relationship building. So fill in the holes where you find the holes. And this is a really good way of figuring that out. This is not skill-based. This is how people work and when they're at their best. So if you can look this up, I do recommend. This is probably something that has been the most impactful to me. Once I was able to address the strengths that my team had and what I had. So when I can tell people what my strengths are and they are communicating with me, it gives us a language to communicate that's very safe. So when I talk to my team and I say, okay, responsibility folks, I need you responsibility folks, I need you to give me some feedback, and I know that you feel really responsible to get this done, but what I want is some brainstorming today, because responsible people usually go into task mode and they want to check things off their list. Does anyone recognize that behavior? And that one is tough. So if you're asking people to wear a different hat, and that's not their comfort zone, and it's not the culture of your organization, and you're very different than what you need them to be, then you can ask them put on that hat, and you can actually call people out. So it's a very kind way, a nice way to call people out for the strengths that they have, not the weaknesses. So again, it's a much more positive way of discussing where you need to go and why you need to go there and why you need to look for this type of person so you can round out your team. All right, any questions before I leave that section just on Strength Finders? Has anyone else used it and do you like it? Audrey said learner. And then Susan said that would be me, responsibility, when I said that, Susan. Yeah. So sorry, I think the chats have a little bit of a delay for me. Susan said taskmaster.
I'd comment.
Go ahead.
Quick. I've actually used Strengths Finders in our team, and what was really interesting about it is if you're going through it, you can see what your 24 are in order of your strengths and the weaknesses. But what had been very valuable to me and some of my team members that I work directly with is I'd been able to parallel it right up to them. And what I noticed with a few of my team members, they were the complete opposite of me. And it was a key eye-opener to understand why we struggled in some business conversations, because they may have come forward with more empathy, where empathy is one of my lower categories. And so they were trying to feel their way, and I'm more of the analytical, and I'm trying to push my way. And so really sitting down and having a conversation with those team members to understand how we are different really helped develop a relationship and change something that was a little bit tough to work through to actually be productive.
Thank you so much, Alicia. That is absolutely spot on. I'm going to tell you, I have a stepdaughter and her name is Jessica, and I love her dearly, but we're opposites. And we had a struggle, Alicia, as you said, in communication. And so my husband, my son, and I are all very similar. And my son is mine, my husband, Jessica's my husband's daughter anyway. So we're a mini Brady Bunch, and we're sitting at the dinner table and we're having all these debates, and Jessica does not communicate. I'm like, what do you think? She's like, I don't know. I don't know. And what is happening is her top 5 strengths are my bottom, and vice versa. So I'm pushing her hard to be like me, and so is her dad. And really, at the end of the day, we need to understand what her strengths are so we can help her grow and develop in those strengths and find jobs and find places where her strengths will make her feel good and she'll be in a better place. Because when we do use them, it works out much better. But it was an amazing aha moment for me, Alicia, as you had said, that it was like, oh, okay, now I understand. So when you're coaching someone and you want to get them to not woo you, I have a lot of wooers on my team, by the way, or you want to talk about just getting the job done, say, hey, I'm going to put my executing hat on. and they understand that language, and they understand that we're just going to get to business. And then the emotional aspect you can work out some other way, and I'll show you that in just a moment because those aspects are important. So you'll have a little of something for everyone. But Alicia, thank you for that, because this is probably one thing that has helped me the most, because I couldn't sum up strength. It would take me years to figure everybody out, but this kind of gives a nice summation. And most people feel that their strengths are very, very realistic. They feel like, wow, that was true. That truly is me. Again, if they're not honest, then that will be an issue. So executing is the ability to catch an idea and make it into reality and know how to implement a solution and work tirelessly to get things done. These are folks that are like, go for it. So you've got someone in high executing, they're just going to really want to get things done, which we need those folks. And then those influencers, they're normally the salespeople, they're the networkers. They see a big room of people and they run to them. That would be me. I don't run from a large crowd of people. I go into the crowd of people, and they get really excited and they have a lot of enthusiasm. Again, me. And I have strengths in all top 5 in all 5 or 4 categories. I find it interesting. I'll let you figure out which one is my top strength. Strategic thinking. These folks are really important because they help everyone stay focused and they absorb information. And see your team in this. If they're reading this and understanding I'm a strategic thinker, this is something to be proud about. And so when you're trying to figure out a concept or figure out a problem, you can go to those folks that are strategic thinkers and get them to bring concepts to you. They're great for brainstorming. They like to analyze and they stretch our future thinking. And then our relationship builders. Those are the folks that really hold the team together. They're emotional. They like to see group results achieved. And so you can actually fine tune your communication based on the strengths of your team and what they need. All right, we're going to go to staffing now. So I'm going to see if you guys have any other questions. Oh, Melanie says, I use this with my current team. As a new manager, it was interesting to see our makeup, and I got to know what motivates each individual in quick fashion. Yeah. It's great. Good. Well, I'm glad many of you are using it. Those of you who are not, many of us are big fans of it, and it's super easy, and I think it's very usable. And again, for culture-based. We're going to talk about staffing real quick. So staffing, you guys can't see this, so I'm just going to talk through it. So it's a lovely video, but we're going to discuss it here anyway. So these are things that I want you to think about, because the interview process, these are just really good best practices in interviewing. When we need someone, and you guys are all going to be in this position soon, is when you need someone and you need to find the right candidate, we don't really go through a thorough process unless we have a team, an HR team, or folks that hold us accountable. So accountability for interviewing, this is the first impression someone has to your brand, not just to you, but to the brand that you represent. So it's really important to make sure that you cover all these things. And I make this a big impact because we're talking about accountability, and it's how you show up every day. It's how you're demonstrating your brand. What are you bringing to the table, and how do you respond, and how do you react? And interviewing sets the tone, and will set the tone forever, because most people remember the interview from when they got hired, their favorite interview or their worst interview. So interviewing is a very important skill. We teach that in Sales Boost, by the way. We have it for the interviewee and the interviewer as well. So have we prepared the candidate? Does the candidate feel prepared for the process? And now that the process is likely virtual, how are you getting them prepared for that process? And that's really key. Put some thought into that. Get your team involved and find out what that looks like. Again, we can bring back the millennial Gen Z action concept into this. And that is, what does the team need to do to get them prepared? What do we need to discuss with them? So if you've got a Gen Z or a millennial and you're very old school computers, you need to be realistic with them that you're not going to have high tech for a while, so they understand and they're not frustrated. So there's different things like that. So during the interview process, being realistic about your culture is going to be key, so that they understand that it's a good fit on both sides. What setting is it going to be? Is it going to be in the afternoon, in the morning, in person? Are you going to make them do a panel of interviews? What's the format? So really important. And then the behavior-based questions. We're going to send you a lot of resources on this one, but the behaviors by discipline, so that you're really asking thoughtful questions. I find that most of the time we interview people until we feel comfortable that they're going to be like us. We like to see the mirror. We like to see ourselves in others. And if you use strength finders, you're going to push yourself out of that and really focus on the questions that are more relative to a person whose strengths you need to be in execution. If they're content management, if they're developing something, you need to have different people for different reasons. And then you want to make sure that you have a feedback loop for team feedback, and so that everyone plays a role. And one thing I will recommend is, please do not use the same questions for every interviewer. So I have a 4-part interview series that I recommend, and then each person has behavior-based. You're rating folks, and that you're doing it in tandem, but they're different questions, so that you can still rate them on the behavior, but you're using a different format. Because what happens if you ask the same questions, you're going to get a better answer. They're going to practice and rehearse on each person they interview with, and they're going to get better and better and better and realize what you're looking for and tell you what you want to hear. So when you can split that out and really ask deep penetrating questions, you're going to get a much better result. So anyway, enjoy those. I'll send them along, and that 4-part series that you can modify as well. And then the follow-up. This is the one we always drop, and this is the one that Gen Z and millennials will complain about the most. I send my resume in to this giant hole in the universe, this black hole, and no one responds and no one does anything with it. And that's branding, because they're going to Glassdoor. They check with each other on what job, who's great, who's nice, what's the interview process like. So realize that you're being evaluated through the entire interview process, but most especially in how you follow up. How many of you give people feedback when you interview them and you let them know why they didn't get the job? Does anyone send a letter, anything formal, a debrief? Does anyone do anything like that? So I recommend that. Here we go. Sorry, I think I'm speeding up a little bit. So Brandy says, only if they ask, we might give them feedback. So we have a premise that we always tell people why they did not get the job, that we were looking for certain criteria, certain skills, or certain things, and why we hired the candidate that we did hire. Not why they didn't get the job, but why we hired the candidate that we selected. And that keeps us accountable, holds us accountable, because if we have to explain to everyone who interviewed for this job, then it's part of our culture that we all have to agree as a team as to why we're hiring this person. So if it's a team approach, you'll get better results and you'll have better buy-in. In fact, you'll get different insight because you'll have different levels and people will see different things. So I like to have people interview with us for the day. I like to see how they interact, what they do, how they go through the day, their manners, professionalism, how they respond, how they prepare. So I try to do a day of interviewing. It depends on the position, but as long in person as you possibly can. And today that's a little challenging, but maybe they can do an on-site with a property or a unit and really determine whether or not it's a good fit for them. Let them see the culture and let them give feedback, because the more they see it, the more they'll know whether or not it's a good fit. Okay, my next favorite topic, I'm gonna call them all my love childs, but onboarding. So onboarding is one area that I don't think we get very well in our industry, and I say hospitality. So as a hospitality focused as we are, onboarding is generally not top of mind. And what happens is we'll have one good onboarding experience with a batch of people, and the next group that comes, we're in a hurry and we didn't prepare enough. So that's really all preparation, and it's making sure that this first impression, as they come into their first day, again, they're going to remember that first day or not, and that first impression matters. So what can we do in a virtual environment now to make onboarding a much more special or unique or meaningful experience? Because it does set the tone for the rest of their communication and their accountability with you. Because if we don't get this part right with onboarding, accountability will be more challenging, because we're going to have to walk the walk, not just talk the talk. So Audrey says, I was just talking about this with my team today. Yeah, Audrey, any other comments there?
Yeah, sorry, I've got dogs whining and a child in the background, so I'm gonna ask for forgiveness first. We really trying to figure out, we realize orientation and onboarding were terrible. We show up and the team member or the new person really doesn't even know where to go, what to do, what to wear, how long their day is going to be. There's too many variables that they just don't have answers to, and instead of being able to concentrate on their own learning, they're having to concentrate on all these other things that potentially worry them. And so, you know, it's restaurants, you have to show up in person in some case. And so I'm really discussing with the team, how can we start to transition towards really taking a step back and looking at the learner experience instead of looking at the tasks that we need to accomplish. And so that was kind of my feedback for them today, but also I'm really interested in the accountability piece, because there's so many people who factor into, you know, how do you know when the person's first day is actually set up to be? How do you know when they've given their 2 weeks notice? How do you know when there's so many other variables and too many people with their hands in the cookie jar that we miss the communication points along the way.
Yeah, just the announcement, the whole process. So we really having a checklist that you really use to hold yourself accountable in this process is key. It is really, really critical. It's Audrey, right? So orientation formats can be in person, virtual, some videos. If you're relying on it to be completely online on onboarding and your first day, you're probably creating a lot of damage. So you're expecting the computer to babysit your new hire. And you want that to be very focused on people first and less on watching videos. You can set that aside. But what we do is I'll share our onboarding schedules with you so you can see what the format looks like. That includes the checklists and the agenda for the first week. Every position is different, I understand that, but onboarding, no matter if it's a manager or if it is a receptionist or a quick service restaurant team member, onboarding is the most important component once you hire your staff, because this really sets the tone. And they know whether or not you actually are walking the walk. I'm going to keep saying that over and over again. So you can just keep talking at them and say, we expect this, but unless you're doing it, they're not going to believe you. So this is really going to demonstrate how you show up and in what way. And so I really appreciate you for speaking up on that, because it is a very painful process for most people. I feel awful that I hired someone who I used to work with, and I said, I'm so sorry, but I can't onboard you properly because she was available when I didn't have time. And so I said, I bumbled through this onboarding. I apologize. And then we did a restart. And I said, okay, restart. So I was able to get restarted on onboarding with her, although the first week was a bit of a mess. And she showed up to all these webinars and all the things we were doing and customer conversations. But just being able to say, you know what, I'm going to restart today. So your real onboarding is going to be on this day. And if you have to restart again, you can, but do it really quickly and do it upfront. So don't mess up many of the days. Planning and preparation, we're so good at that most of the time, but this is the one area that we usually fall really short, and it really makes a big impression, and it matters. Let's talk about expectations. So setting expectations is key to accountability. So I'm sure you guys were expecting something along discipline and those things. But setting expectations, having job descriptions are the basis for coaching sessions, and making sure your job descriptions are relevant. So what we do, again, once a year, how many of you go back and actually look at your job descriptions that you created like 5 years ago? Making sure your job descriptions are relevant every year. So everyone should actually look at their own job description. We make it into a strategic day of sessions, and we basically update and present our job description. Why is it different? Why is it changing? And why do we need it to change? And getting your team involved in their job descriptions moving forward is going to be really, really important. So if you can make it a team building activity, I think you'll see a lot of fun in that, and people will own their job descriptions more, because they're actually going to put things that you probably didn't even know they're doing. They can be incorporated into their development plans. And so that's probably the basis here. That job description is really the precursor for what's really expected of them. So make sure you haven't just dusted them off, but really go in and make sure you understand what the role is now and what it should be and what your expectations are. How high do you want them to jump and why? What do you want them to wear? So this is one of those major culture building opportunities that people miss. They just throw out a job description that they had from HR from 5 years ago and hope that it sticks, that people will be able to interpret it, and they really can't. So if you're going to set expectations, make sure the job description is relevant, complete, and updated. All right, so the path to success is through job descriptions, then KPI, coaching, and then you hit your goal. And that is really the main process here. So this is interesting. This demonstrates, am I consistently measured against my goals? And what does this say? It says, and am I held accountable? Sorry, I think I have to push the button again. There we go. 54% of most teams agree that they're held accountable and measured against their goals, and they're held accountable. That's really strange to have only 54% on average. So this is something that is challenging, because if they don't know what they're going to be held accountable to, then it's going to be really hard to hold them accountable. So KPIs are a great way to create performance factors or performance indicators. I'm sure you either call them KPI, sorry, I changed KRA to KPI. So KPIs, again, key performance metrics, you guys already know what this means, but how to use it properly is probably what we don't spend a lot of time on. Using this properly is really important. So I went through KPIs with my team. It took them a year to get them right. A year. KPIs are critical because they must be specific and measurable. People like to make them general, but they need to be specific tasks. So I make KPIs, and I'll show you that in a moment, into quarterly segments, because KPIs are not just what we want to have happen eventually. These are measurable, specific, and I'm going to go back to, these are the stepping stones. Where do we want them to go and why? What is it specific that they need to do? So I put this slide in here on purpose, because that means they know where they need to go and what they need to do. This is a huge opportunity in communication and accountability, and for cultures, because KPIs are how we hold people, ourselves accountable, and our team members accountable. So normally we just try to get them done really quickly, spit them out, send them in, and get them in on time. But they need to be time bound and achievable, measurable, and specific. And the goal is to improve communication with your team members so you can give them feedback. Did they do it well or not? Did they do it on time or not? Did they do it on their own without any assistance? So whatever it may be, and we'll share a lot of KPI samples with you, it's key to get your KPIs right. I'm going to open up the floor for questions, because this is an area that I don't know if you guys are good at this or not, but for most people, this is probably the most challenging to get KPIs correct. So if you take the job description, the KPIs are usually easier. So if I have to reset an entire culture, I reset an entire culture with a company called Millionaire Dallas, which is flight-based operations. And we basically just started from scratch. We just basically torched everything that ever existed, threw it all away, and we had the teams themselves create their job descriptions. We had the teams themselves create their KPIs. We had the teams themselves create all of these things. And so it was a lot easier because there was buy-in from everyone. So if you can see this as an exercise, it's another great opportunity to get everybody on the same page. Again, another culture building opportunity. And then KPIs, you should have 3 to 5 per quarter. You don't want to have a list of 10. That's a to-do list. These are key performance indicators that will determine your success moving forward. Period, end of story. Any questions? We'll get into that a little bit more. Okay, consistency and feedback. There is a better approach, and consistent feedback. How many of you have annual reviews? Okay, I'm going to ask that question and flip it around. How many of you have something different than annual reviews? It's a rare occasion. Oh, nope, I don't see any notes here. Anybody want to pipe in? Okay, so consistent feedback. This is where I'm going to spend some time today. It removes stress. You see how employees fit, and it makes sure that you are focused on company goals. And you're giving feedback on a regular, consistent basis. So I'll let you guys watch this later. Giving feedback consistently is key with weekly check-ins, monthly one-on-ones, and quarterly KPI reviews. That's really the process. And there's a component here for self-accountability, and this is something that I highly recommend, and it's 360-degree reviews. So 360, that means if I'm going to give you feedback, I'm going to request feedback for myself. And that is tough for most team members to give their boss and other team members feedback. If you can start a culture today, hit the reset button and change part of your culture is to get feedback for yourself. If it was a presentation, what could I have done differently? What could I do better? What did I do well? I immediately, after a session, I ask my team that question. And so we give people feedback, they give me feedback. And in our one-on-ones, I ask for it. And I demonstrate that I heard them and I implement it. So I will let them know, hey, I heard you guys loud and clear. I'm gonna work on being on time because I'm always late. I'm gonna work on, I would literally be late to my own funeral. I swear, it's really a painful process. But this is really important. So 360-degree reviews is a concept that if you can embody that, you're going to be really successful in changing your culture. Because if it's all about them, then they're gonna feel that. But if it's all about us as a team, what I'm working on, where I need to go, what I'm focused on, it will create a sense of trust and purpose that you're all moving in a different direction together. And when you can assess yourself and get that assessment, and it's clean communication, it is a wonderful thing. It is slightly terrifying for people to give you feedback, but if you can do that in a great way, and I'll show you that in just a moment, it will be very impactful. I'm going to read your comments. Let's see. There's no research that shows the annual review improves performance. That's quite true. Thank you, Karen. Annual reviews are the pits, so I hope you don't do annual reviews. Those should be bye-bye. You do not want to do annual reviews. You should do weekly, monthly, and quarterly check-ins because people should always know where they stand. Oh, Janet says, I have weekly check-ins and monthly one-on-ones. This has been very easy for them to give me feedback and very easy for them now. That's great. After we go through this, Janet, I'd like to hear your comments and feedback as well. So we're going to go through this approach. So what does a weekly check-in look like? How can we use our time more consistently and concisely so that we get to the meat of it and we are actually being really focused and we're prioritizing and using our time and energy properly? And reviews can be this emotion, like never-ending, what I want to say, emotional breakdown, I guess. So if you're consistent and concise in the format of it, you will actually get to the results that you want, and I'll show you that in just a moment. All right, we use a concept, and it's a platform called 15-5. 15-5 is a platform for accountability. And so I'm going to show you the process, and then you can use it. And then we have some forms that we developed that are similar with weekly check-ins. But when I saw 15-5, I literally fell on my seat. I was like, yay, they created this for me. I'm so excited. So I literally thought somebody had read my mind, and it incorporates strengths. I was even more excited about that. So this may be a way for those of you that are not comfortable or this is out of your arena. I think this is a really good platform for your teams, and it can really create that accountability. So if you can't do it in a 15-5 format, follow the, 15-5 platform, follow the format. The format's the most important part, and that's what I'll walk you through today. All right, so what's really critical in the weekend or the weekly check-ins is they don't have to be verbal check-ins. These can be check-ins that are actually written. And so we technically don't have weekly check-ins that are verbal. we have weekly check-ins that are online. So you can see on the right-hand side what it looks like. So I can see that Carly, she's one of our team members, director in programming, and Carly rated this previous week, this is in February, as a 4 out of 5. And then she can outline why, and she'll explain that in a moment, why she rated it a 4 out of 5. Again, you're getting a temperature reading from your team. You understand how they feel. So you can put this in any format, doesn't matter. But getting people to rate how they feel is a good way, a really healthy way for them to kind of express their feelings. Maybe it was just awful because, as Pacifica, as you said, they're wearing so many hats and initiatives change and it's just frustrating. So let them say that it's frustrating. It's okay. It's okay to let them say it wasn't a great week for me, or I lost 2 pieces of business, or I gained 5 pieces of business. I'm super excited. Let them demonstrate that. That has been something that we have found was really lacking in our side, is asking how people feel on a regular basis. And not that I'm the empathy person, because again, that's on my bottom 5. I think that's the last one on my list. But what it does is it makes them feel included, it makes them feel heard, and it makes them feel like we care. And so we do care, because when they don't rate the week as a 5, I'm like, oh no, what happened? What was wrong? And if someone rates it as a 2 or a 3, I'm just very upset. So it makes me much more accountable to being consistent in this format, because getting that insight is very important. It creates a rhythm of communication. We do our our weekly check-ins on Friday afternoons. And that way everyone knows what their tasks are for the week ahead. We don't have to stop the process on Monday, because people can get out of the starting blocks and know what they're going to be doing. It's really important that way. Employees have the opportunity to provide a look back, and they can actually outline their priorities for the week ahead. This concept has been really, really critical to our success. Managers provide feedback, direction, priorities, and recognition, and those things are all really important. So you can see here that Carly has priorities listed here down below, what was achieved and what wasn't. And so she's marking her priorities here on what she was able to get accomplished. So the nice thing about this is we can reset priorities. So if my team says, here are my priorities 1 through 5, I can say, I want you to move 5 to 1 and 1 to 3. So I can reset those priorities really quickly. I don't need to have a conversation and explain myself. I can just make a note and say, hey, let's shift this around. I really want you to focus on this. It's not emotional, and it's really impactful and very important. You also make sure you have an agenda, and so those are discussions. If it needs to be a conversation, then you can make it into one if needed. But really, when people go through this process and you consistently respond and react well, you're going to actually see a lot of benefits here. Again, keep talking about those wins and recognition. All right, priorities. You can review the priorities for the week, and you can shift them. So you can see Andrea was giving feedback here. And so she was able to give feedback on the best practices. And that's really important, because people need to know what they need to be doing and where it falls in the priority list and why. Again, if we can ever outline the why we're making a decision, it's better. So I always explain why we're making that call. Then we get more buy-in. All right, most important is the look back. And this is something that we use all the time. I would say, I learned this from a session that I heard with the Thunderbirds or the Blue Angels. I forget which one it was, but it was a pilot. And you know how they fly so close to each other where they're just like barely inches away and they're going at warp speed? It's just really crazy how they do that. And what's really interesting is the way they do that, how they can be that precise and not kill each other and work as a team, is that they all do look backs. And the look back is really critical. What did we do well? What could we do differently? So look back and looking forward. So you can see what went well at the top here, getting a trade show outline, being caught up on the trade shows, content, finishing content. Yay, I got those done. So it also makes the individual feel good about what they accomplished. And it also holds them accountable to want to check those things off. Because if you leave things undone and you have to present it every week, that's an accountability measurement mode. And then what's something you want to accomplish in the future. And those are important too, to keep asking these future questions. So you're getting a little dose of how people are feeling about their career development, where they want to go and what their aspirations are. And then recognition. So giving high fives. If you can have a location somewhere that's centralized where you can get people on a consistent basis, so every Friday they think about what they accomplished. Honestly, it takes 15 minutes. That doesn't take our team more than that, 10, 15 minutes. And when you can give high fives, hey, great job. So you can see that Casey or someone gave all these high fives. It really is helpful for everyone to hear those things so they can say, great, thank you so much. And then the feedback. So helping people grow. And so if this question is on the list, then you can't avoid it all the time. So it's really healthy to say, Carly, I really want you to grow, and here's what here's what I'd like you to do differently, and here's why. So constant coaching and feedback, this is probably one of the most critical components. And again, this isn't a weekly check-in, so it doesn't take a lot of time. If there's something big, we're going to put it on their monthly one-on-ones. So now we're going to monthly one-on-ones. So before I do that, does anyone have any questions about the weekly check-ins? Okay, I'm going to keep going then. So monthly one-on-ones. So this is what the monthly one-on-ones look like. Sometimes in the weekly check-ins, we push things over to the monthly one-on-ones. So keeping, even if you can't get on the website and use that, the platform, keep a list of those discussion points so that when you have your one-on-one, the team member knows that they're going to prepare for that conversation and they're going to prepare information to talk to you about that. So having one-on-ones monthly should take 30 minutes because you prepared or you're going to have these type of conversations, unless there's some more challenging conversations. But what you're doing is you're making sure that you're streamlining and enhancing the meeting and the talking points, and that you're, again, establishing that regular cadence. And it's really a two-way street. So you want to make sure that there's discussion and that it's something that's meaningful and it's related to their KPIs. So here's the checklist of what you need to look for. So you can put on, you can see on the right-hand side, the new action items, and then the questions that you're asking. So you can see that you need to be able to ask your team questions and you need to be able to give them feedback. So if feedback is difficult for you, this will be a great exercise for you. So the checklist on the left-hand side really explains the things that you should be doing. Again, prepare the talking points in the agenda. We fall apart when it comes to our teams. We focus on projects and we focus on other things other than the communication with our team members. And so this is an area that, again, maybe it's a Google spreadsheet that you're keeping track of those on a monthly basis in a file folder. Could be many different ways of putting this in practice. But one of the things that's critical is the employees feel that this is the most necessary. My team changed dynamically how they were feeling and thinking because we were all on the same page and knew where we were going and why we were going there. They can discuss the challenges that they're having. If they really want to go right and you need to go left, then you can deal with it on a monthly basis. And that is what I found is probably the most valuable here, is that my team wanted to go over here and I wanted to go left. They wanted to go right, I want to go left. And so I didn't realize that. I probably sensed it, but I didn't know what to do with it. And so until we have this consistent feedback loop and communication, and again, 15 minutes a week, not a big deal. And then you review them on Friday or first thing Monday morning and make sure that everyone gets them consistently. So that's holding yourself accountable to give people the feedback that they need. And then your monthly one-on-ones, your focus should be making them 30 minutes. If your team knows they're going to be 30 minutes, they won't chit chat so much. So I'm going to talk about that concept in just a moment. All right, then we go into the quarterly KPI review. So I'm going to ask you on this screen, what here is popping out? Because the KPIs, we can always see within this format, which we use 15.5, which I enjoy very much, as you can tell. But it's really all the things I've been doing. It's just more of an automated approach. So what's really important here is the part on the right-hand side where I can actually see on a consistent basis every week how my team is doing on their KPIs. It's front row and center. So making sure that everyone knows what their KPIs are and knows how close they are to hitting them. That way, if there's a KPI that doesn't make any sense anymore, you can remove it and replace it with something else. But what happens is we wait until quarterly reviews. Oh yeah, that wasn't really important. So we're not giving meaningful feedback to folks. So make sure that everything's clean and it's measurable and it's specific and it's relatable. So if you just have 3, that's better than having 6 or 10 that really don't matter very much. So make sure that they're very, very impactful and that they're meaningful to your organization, and make sure that you're tracking them on a weekly, monthly, and then quarterly basis. Your quarterly reviews should really need to not take longer than 45 minutes to an hour, because you've been having these discussions all along, and they can be a little bit meatier about personal development and training, and you can get into more specifics with them. Even take them to lunch or do something that's a little bit more fun. So if you keep up with this cadence, I think you're going to find a lot of benefit from it. And then last but not least, this is just showing the 3 key performance factors, and these are the things that are expected. So again, it has to be specific and measurable. Did Leslie develop and test and launch 3 private label courses this quarter? Yes or no? It has to be a yes or no. Period, end of story. Did she develop, test, and launch 7 retail courses each quarter? Yes or no? So the answer to the question should always be yes or no. It can't be maybe. It has to be one or the other. So that's the only rule in KPIs. It must be specific and measured. I'm going to see if you guys have any other questions. Melanie asked, did you ever have an issue with redundancy? Actually, no, because once you get past a certain topic, it's just part of the KPIs, and then people know. So again, if it's 15 minutes in weekly sessions that, again, you don't have to communicate, that relate to the KPIs, when you're speaking to KPIs, you're speaking to your success factors. What are the key performance indicators for your organization? So if you create them for the organization, and for the managers, and then for the team members, everyone knows how they're making an impact, and they can see it, and they can see it loud and clear. So no actually is the answer to that question. It actually makes it less redundant, because we're not just reinforcing the same thing over and over again. We're talking about specific things that will move the needle. Let's see if you guys have any other questions before we move forward. Okay, I'm gonna talk about coaching. Again, another fun thing here. So a coach, I like this from Tom Landry, is someone who tells you what you don't want to hear, who has you see what you don't want to see, so you can be who you always could be. And we've all had great coaches, and so I make it my task to be a great coach. And I can only be a great coach if I have great information and if I have this cadence with my team. Just because I did a great job in a session with one team member and they were smiling at the end of it does not mean that it was successful. And sometimes we focus on the emotions of our team members versus really how they're demonstrating and if they really feel that they were successful. They want to see green, not yellow, not red. They want to see that they're successful. They want to see their results. So this is an accountability area that we usually lack in, and we don't have discipline around. Your discipline matters here more than anyone else's. So if you say on Friday at 3 o'clock, I'm going to always read everyone's weekly check-ins, then do it at 3 o'clock every week and have everything in on time, and make sure that it's on your calendar and you give yourself time. So if you have 4 team members, it's going to take you an hour. But that's an hour of looking at priorities and making sure you're giving them feedback on a regular basis. So if it's not on your calendar, it's not going to happen. I do mine Monday morning, first thing Monday morning, because on Friday my brain's fried and I don't have enough energy to give on a Friday. But I ask my team to give me the 15 fives or their weekly check-ins on Friday near the end of the day or around 3 o'clock. And again, it's for priority setting. All right, let's go into coaching. So we have to know their motivations. We have to know their strengths. So we need to get to know them. And team building exercises are great for that. Again, having strengths to give you insight will be very helpful. If you don't know their motivations and strengths, then you're going to have to do more behavioral based questions and go back to their interview answers and use that. And if you wrote down notes, and that's why these behavioral based questionnaires are so important, because you will know, you'll see what really does motivate them and what their strengths are. A lot of people know how to interview and they practice interviewing and they can be fantastic. But when it's behavior based, you're going to see some of their motivations really come out and shine through. Coaching should really clarify performance expectations. You know, it's one of those areas that coaching isn't about giving people the right answer. It's about getting your team to get to the right answer. So it's actually about asking really great questions. So here's the number one premise of being a great coach. Stop talking. It's the most important thing. So don't talk. Your job is to not talk. So when you ask one question, you're going to then ask another question. And then when the employee answers, you're going to ask another question. And the questions are to get to the answer or get to the realization. And that's one thing that most people in coaching think, that they have to be able to command and yell and shout and tell people what to do. They may ask your advice and you may want to give them advice, but your best coaching will be when you get people to think for themselves. So I'm going to go through a little exercise with a scenario here. Okay, we're going to use scenario number one. So if anybody wants to role play with me, I'm going to demonstrate this. So an employee is performing well, however, they're not coming in on time and they tend to be late, leave early, and not keeping to the standard schedule. Do you guys have anybody like that? Well, you may have before, and now you don't know. Now everyone just works in their pajamas and they work like 15 hours a day. But we know these folks, and let's talk about how we would coach someone through that. So does anybody have anything that you would use? What question would you ask someone in this situation to start the coaching dialogue? Anybody want to try it? All right. So Kristen, can I use you as my, whoops, let's see.
Yes, of course.
Okay. Okay, Erica said, I'm going to use this one. This is good. Thank you, Erica. Erica said, what challenges are you experiencing in your schedule? And Kristen, I'm going to ask you to be the person, so I'll ask the questions.
Okay, so I am late leaving. Well, my dog, he takes a long time going to the bathroom before I before I need to leave and get to work, and I just have a lot to do at home. So I need to leave early, and home comes before work.
What do you think you can do differently to make sure that you're on time every day and that you're working within your schedule?
I can make sure that I set alarms to leave at the right time to be able to get to work in plenty of time.
Great. Well, that sounds like a plan. I look forward to seeing that next week. So it actually is kind of simple, but I didn't say anything. I didn't really call them out other than, hey, notice that you're having an issue getting in on time. Tell me about that. And so that opens up the dialogue. But the second question, because I asked another question, I focused on Kristen actually finding the answer. And so I didn't say, hey, we really need you to be on time every day, because otherwise we take that as a, yes, I know I have to be on time every day, but I have some challenges. So a coach is really getting the other person to think about the solution. So don't ask just one question, because it's going to sound a little condescending if you ask just one. So ask them in a precise way, so that, and you practice them with folks and make sure you understand that. But if you walk through this exercise and you ask those questions, it'll feel different to the team member. So Kristen, how was that when I was asking you that second question where you had to come up with a solution?
Good. I had to come up with a solution real fast.
Didn't you?
I knew that I would have to hold myself accountable to. So
exactly. Yeah. So that's pretty simple. It doesn't take a long time, but you'll get people who are frustrated and angry and disappointed and like, she doesn't like me, yada, yada. So when you ask the questions, powerful questions are much better to get that person to think about, and then they realize that you're not going to give them every solution. Your job is to coach them to the solution. All right, we're going to go through another one. So this one is a little bit more challenging. They get tougher as we go. Employees good with customers, however, they display a negative attitude internally. They are not a team player. Their negative attitude causes issues with team members and reflects poorly to other departments. I think we all know folks like this. Anybody want to do role play with me? Kristen will have to vote you if nobody saves you. Somebody save Kristen.
That's okay. I'll go ahead. I love these. Sorry, I was getting ready to answer what question I thought you were going to ask me. Please go ahead.
You're prepared. So we can switch it around. Are you ready? Do you want to ask a question this time?
Sure, absolutely. So I was ready to, okay. Negative attitude causes. Actually, let's go ahead and role play the other way so I don't take up too much time.
Okay. Let's see if somebody gives us a good question. I like that. Erica, you're good. Erica said, how do you feel about your fellow team members? Great entry to this one. So Kristen, how do you feel about your fellow team members?
Yeah, you know, I prefer to work alone. I definitely, like, I don't love working with the team.
Yeah, tell me more about that. Why is that?
Well, I just get more done when I'm on my own. They just distract me.
Yeah. So how do you think that you're actually being perceived by the team when you really want to focus on doing things by yourself and not participating with a team? What do you think that feels like to them?
You know, it really probably makes them feel like I'm very isolated, and personally just don't enjoy working with them. And really, I probably very much make them, I'm being rude. I'm not being a part of the team.
And I'll just ask one more question, but what do you think you can do differently to make sure you show up so your team members see a positive person? So again, I'm sorry, I'm going to tell you the answer to the question, but I'm phrasing this so you understand why I'm asking this question. So what do you think you can do to demonstrate a more positive influence on your team members and that you're willing to work with them?
You know, I really would, moving forward, I'm going to invite their feedback and ask for their assistance on projects, and provide assistance where needed as well, so that I can start integrating and being more part of the team.
So I was going to say, why do you think that's important as my last question? So, and why do you think that's important? Why do you think that's important to the integrity of our culture and, or whatever the case may be?
Yeah, because it's not just an individual success. You know, the entire team needs to work together. It's one team, one goal. So we're all in this together, and that's really important for the workplace.
So you can see that these scenarios are pretty normal, but we don't deal with them. So can you see the coaching situation and the way I'm asking? I'm not saying a word, I'm just asking questions, and the team member is actually reflecting and responding and finding solutions. This is the most challenging thing for me to do, is ask good questions. And so I make it my mantra when I coach with people, because I like to speed up the process and I like to get results. And so I like to give people what they need to know, because I'm a trainer. And when you're a trainer in general, we like to tell people what they should be doing. And so we need to sit on our hands and listen and not talk, or just ask really good questions. So this works really well in a virtual format, actually, so it's not uncomfortable. I think that it actually takes away some of the discomfort of being in person, so you don't have that negative energy and electricity. So actually in a virtual environment, it works well. So I'm not going to go through the third one, but I think everyone kind of gets it. This one's probably the most, one of the most challenging, that, you know, someone's just not doing their job. They have a lot of tenure and they're really nice, but they're just not doing their job up to standard. And when someone's not, we all know people that get to a certain point and they just kind of get lax. And what do you guys think would be the best way of handling this situation? Not a coaching situation, but just in dealing with a situation. Kristen, what's off the cuff now that you've been my guinea pig on the scenario role
Yeah.
playing?
So, employees has been in the company for a long tenure, performing up to job standards. I mean, asking the question on, you know, I would ask the question, do they believe in the standards? I mean, I'd try and get to, do they believe the work that they are doing? And what's prohibiting them from reaching those specific standards? And then get into what that could look like from a team's perspective, and how they all work together. And
Beautiful. Yeah, absolutely. That's perfect. So the KPI, actually your weekly check-ins, your monthly one-on-ones, and your KPIs should really kind of get you to that point where this is not uncomfortable, but you're at 100% right. Sorry, I shouldn't have said but, and you're complete, what you just said is perfect, because you're asking, and you don't want it to sound condescending. So you want to ask questions in a curiosity way, with curiosity. And so if it's with curiosity, tell me can also be a good way. If you sometimes people may say you sound condescending, if your husband or kids say that may be how you come across. Some people do. And if it does come across that way, make sure that you know how to ask questions in a manner in which it doesn't sound like you're asking a demanding question. Try to sound curious, and you'll keep the conversation up here versus it being a very emotional conversation. So just a few tips there. Does anybody have anything else they want to share on this part? The coaching part's really important.
Erica's nailing the questions. What gaps are you experiencing in excitement or interest in your day-to-day?
Nice. That's fantastic. Yeah, that's beautiful. What a wonderful question. So these are real situations that happen to us every day. And there's these things that linger. And what happens is, from a culture standpoint, if you don't address them, your team will know. The longer you avoid addressing a problem area, the longer it's going to remain a problem for the whole team, because they're depending on you as the leader to help move the ship. But you don't want to just tell people what to do. Accountability is really in how you're actually getting everyone to see the greater goal, and that you're all working towards that, and how everyone impacts that goal. So going back and addressing those things, Kristen, as you just did, was perfect. It's just really probably the most important thing is to making sure you communicate properly. Okay, communicate, we're almost there. Sorry, I'm going a little bit over. Communication. So it's the purposes for information, for priority setting, for celebrating, for recognition and rewards. And here's some more stats. So communication between leaders and employees is good. Most people say about 35 to 45%. So we think everything's great because people smile at us, but how they really feel is very different. So that's really important to know. Again, why your weekly check-ins, you should ask them how they feel, because if there's not great communication, they're going to be honest about that feedback. And then leadership recognizes strong job performance. The answer here on agreeing is 45%. It's pretty low. And it's because we're not giving feedback, and we're not recognizing and giving recognition from each other, because I can't see everything my team does. But if I don't create a culture of us giving feedback that's fair and accurate and immediate, then we miss those moments. And we hope we remember and we give people awards at the end of the year based on something that we conjured up. So it can't be based on whether or not we like someone more or less, but really whether or not we have the data. So look at it as a data point. So make sure that you have a lot of recognition and rewards and celebrations related to attaining the goals, so that everyone understands that when you do hit your milestones, or someone hits their KPIs early, somewhere along those lines, that you're celebrating those successes, because with successes also come defeats, which we're all living with right now. And I know that none of us like them, but it's really important to talk about those things. All right, communication. Here's a few more bits, and this is really important, so I hope you walk away with something else here that's juicy. So ways that we can communicate with our team and ways that we recognize our team. So what if you never had the ability to use email again? You couldn't use email. How would you communicate with your team and recognize them if you couldn't use email? I think we've all determined that virtual environments like GoToMeeting and Zoom probably work, but what else would you do if you didn't have email? And the reason why I say that is because email is evil. It's evil email. I don't like email. I tell my team, I want everyone to, if you send me an email, I'm going to expect that it's an announcement, it's important, it's a memo for the bulletin board. I mean, it's a big deal. Because I don't know about you, but I still have about 4,000 emails in my inbox, and we all just get overwhelmed with emails. So communicating via email is not the way to communicate. It is dead. We need to just put it to bed. So a great exercise and opportunity is to get your team to focus on how to communicate effectively. And again, it's part of accountability and culture. Where are you going to and how are you going to communicate these things? So it's part of your culture. And we avoid email. So we use Teams, which is like Slack. I don't know what you guys use, but we use a lot of different things. But if you can get everyone to avoid using email, it'll be very helpful. Let's see, Karen Woolard brought up, okay, we're gonna go back to that in just a minute because I think I skipped over that. So there's a book that I do highly recommend, and it's called, and I read this a long time ago, and I'm glad I did, but it was very impactful. And Set the Tone, so you can see on the left-hand side that it kind of sets the tone for that weekly check-in, the monthly one-on-one, and quarterly reviews. And so I've been doing this for a long time, and I use Death by Meetings as a book that I wanted to just get better as a leader. I was okay, and my team was, I had an interaction with my team once when I was running Hilton Direct. And they sat me down, and these are my leaders, the supervisors. And they sat me down in a strategy meeting. So I'm expecting we're going right, and they all took a detour and went left. And they said, "You're not letting us have any fun." And so they communicated with me in a very effective way that said, we're not on the same page. And so it really made me reflect and say, I go back to Ray Dalio because it's all about look backs and reflection. And I will say that Death by Meetings really helped me get really better at meetings. If we avoid calling, so we're going to avoid two things. Don't send emails unless it's absolutely necessary. Think twice before you send an email. Number two, don't call anything a meeting. It's a brainstorming session. It's a weekly check-in. It's a monthly one-on-one. It's a strategy session. It's a planning meeting. Do whatever you can to avoid the word meeting, because it just means a placeholder for junk that's not ever going to get, we're not going to get anything accomplished. The other thing, if you were in my session, the 10 ways of being innovative, is cut every meeting in half. So if it usually takes an hour, cut it down to a half hour. That means people will show up, they won't chit chat, they will be prepared, they have 5 minutes to speak, they have 1 minute to discuss their point, whatever it is. But think about, if you're going to have meetings and strategy sessions, the preparation and then the accountability for the time is really important. That'll keep everyone to very concise comments, and they'll be more thoughtful versus just speaking out loud. And I can't say enough about learning how to hold a meeting. So there's different methods. You can use project management tool boards. You can use Teams, chit chat, whatever it is. But I think this is probably, Teams works really well for us because I can say, hey, are you available for a quick chat? So we call them chats, and we do video chats. And so we pipe in on things. Hey, can you look at this with me? So we can knock on each other's door and say, hey, can you help me? But I can see if it's red or green, if they're available or not available. And so we really use that so we don't have a lot of interruptions, and it's been very helpful. And we use that, and we also have rooms, and they have purpose. So we have workspace that's purposeful, not desks. So nobody has a desk anymore. There's no desks. There's work stations so that we get work done, and we have focus rooms where it's quiet. And then we have rooms where we have strategy, and we have brainstorming, and we have ideation. So we have two different places. One's your quiet zone, one's your fun, creative zone. So it's a different way of communicating, but it's also a different way of shifting how you're working. So it's another culture opportunity for you. And then think about the timing of your daily check-ins with people. What are you doing every day? What can you scrub? What can you cut? Just try to, is it absolutely necessary to have a weekly meeting with everyone? Is it really accomplishing anything? Or do you need to meet with people one-off weekly and then have more of a strategy meeting a monthly basis or more periodically? So really think through those things. But if you have static meetings, think very, very, very intently on what you're doing with your meetings and how you're addressing those. So we have 2 rules: no emails and don't call anything a meeting. Call it what it is. So I want to check in with you and see if you guys had any other questions or comments or feedback, since we're almost done. Another good book I heard from someone is Crucial Conversations. Thanks, Mike Andrews. That sounds great. And then another book Karen Wallard says is How to Say Anything to Anyone. Yes, those are amazing. Amazing approach and ideas for tough situations. Thank you. That's great. And then picking up the phone and talking to people. That's kind of a new concept. So yes, I agree, Karen. Very much so. All right, any other questions before we end? I hope this was beneficial to you and you guys learned something and got some juicy nuggets.
If anyone is typing in comments, I'll go ahead and do a quick chart wrap up. Greta, thank you so much. I know we've got a question coming in, so we'll make sure that we get to that. And I appreciate everyone's time today and staying on with us a little bit longer to learn more, which is wonderful. Greta, it sounds like we're going to send out an email to all participants. I've been recording as well, so we're going to share that with you if you'd like to share this with any members of your team or any other training or HR professionals. And for any folks that don't know about Chart, more interested in learning more, please connect with me directly. And I'm happy to share my little over 15 years of Chart membership experience with you. So,
it is a wonderful, wonderful organization that we are so excited to be part of. And it's been, I feel like I'm with my people. And I feel a strong connection with everyone. So thank you guys very much. So let me know what your takeaways are. So I did get a takeaway from Alicia, thank you. She said the idea of weekly tacticals and, weekly tacticals and strategic meetings. I'm gonna implement that, thank you. And then it was very interesting how Greta wove accountability around culture and how she made the argument that accountability is the original point of culture from Erica. Accountability is your culture. That is absolutely true. All right. Well,
Hey,
thanks
Greta?
everyone. Yes.
I just wanted to add that I think great concepts, and I love the way that you could work with your teams. But I also think that a lot of these concepts relative to developing culture and accountability could be driven through the training and development that Chart members are building out, like onboarding. The one thing that I thought of when you were on that, or shortly after you got off that onboarding slide, is has anybody looked at their onboarding program now that we're in the midst of COVID? Because if you have that video of your CEO talking about the organization is very different now than it was pre-COVID. And how do you want to address your new hires as they're coming in with the apprehension that is all around serving a community that could go, that can really harm them, so to speak? And have you updated that onboarding, and are you getting the feedback even from your learners, and really allowing them to be accountable for meeting the different goals and the different skills that you're asking them to learn in an effort to be shift ready? So I think a lot of your concepts that you talked about today could be really leveraged by the people on this webinar, but Chart members across the board from an L&D strategy perspective as well.
Thank you for that. And I totally agree, because in hospitality, we have to be able to, again, I say walk the walk, and that's an impact, because if we demonstrate it to our teams that we care and we're hospitable, they're going to demonstrate that to our customers. And we know that, you know, who's more important, the employees or the customers? And there's always this great debate on which way that goes, but your team members are your human capital. And our budgets are 60 to 80% staff, human capital. And it's all of our jobs through Chart and our membership and our organizations to make sure that we impact our human capital in a very positive way. So you guys all have a very important role in all of this. So I applaud you for recognizing that, because it's incredibly important. So I'm really glad you brought that up. Thank you. Any other comments? Let's see, one more. Team members are internal customers and should be considered as much as external customers. Yes, Erica. Both, you know, you have to treat people well. And I think your comment about onboarding is we miss the boat sometimes through all of those different steps. So I'm glad you guys have gleaned some positive and some new concepts. These are all things we know, but these are just maybe a different way of doing it, so it's a little bit more productive and more concise. So thank you all for listening and for your time today. Certainly appreciate it.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you, guys. Great call.
Thank you. Thanks for your participation.
Thank you.